Hello, in this demo we will show you how to use iDocs and integrate with SAP application. Specifically what we will do is we'll show you how a process flow can be created where you can get data from a database, for example, and then map it to an iDoc outbound format. And then we'll show you how it can be also scheduled to run at a particular time. So the first thing that we will do is we'll log in as our login account. And here I'm logging in as an admin. And the password here is Indigo1. That's the default password. Now, in this particular interface that you're looking at, what we'll do is we'll first go in and develop our process flow. And the process flow will contain multiple activities. The first activity that we will set up is, let's suppose we want to set up the iDoc activity first. So here we will go to Schema under Develop, and let's create a new iDoc schema. So here iDoc is a fixed length flat file, and in this case we will type in our name of the activity and inventory receipt. And for the iDoc, SAP has a ability to extract out the definition, and we have the definition for iDocs depending upon whichever iDocs you want. And what we will do is we have a import definition file, and the XSD is basically the definition of this flat file structure for inventory receipt, for example. And then we will click on Browse. And as part of this demo, I will also send you the XSD of this schema. And we will upload it. So this is for the movement of materials. And then we will simply click on Save. So just click on Save. And when you save it, you will notice that automatically it will show you that you have created a new schema and you are the owner of this particular schema. It was created on this date and time. We also support versioning, so if you make a change in the iDoc, for example, this particular schema, then you can have different versions of the same one. So it really depends on what your use case is. The next thing that we will do is let's talk about the source. And let's suppose your source is an Oracle database or any other database for that matter. And we support ODBC connection as well as JDBC. So we have both options. And if you have a DNS database connection on your local instance, then you can provide that too. So here under the database info under connector, this is something an admin can create so that developers can then simply go ahead and create the schema and use the mapping. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the connector, go into database, and I have a predefined database connection. Now you will notice that this has JDBC, but it doesn't have to be the JDBC string. It could be an ODBC connection. It could be an IP address here rather than localhost. So it really depends on what your URL type is. We define it as a URL, but it doesn't have to be a JDBC URL. It could be an ODBC connection as well, where in that case the user ID and password will not be needed. So in any case, you have the connection set, and you give any name and description of the connection, because then you will need this to create the schema, which I'm going to show you next. So here we will go to Services, and we will go to Schema, and then we can go into a database schema. Now let's suppose we want to create a new one. So whenever you go to a service page under services, whenever you go to any of these service categories, you will first be taken into its repository where you can actually see if there's an existing activity that you can reuse. In this case, let's suppose we don't have any existing schema for this particular source database. We want to create a new one, so let's create a new one. So here we will give a name as our inventory database schema, and this is the schema of the view to extract data, right? So this could be a view that you can select, and I'll show you how you can do that. So here you will select that particular connection, because this will allow us to go and do an investigation of which tables we want to choose. And here we will click on Browse Tables. And when you click on Browse Tables, it will show you the list of tables that are part of that database connection, right? So whatever tables are there in that database will show up here. If you have those under schema, like the database schema, and then you want to have all those tables there, then first it will show you all the schemas that you have defined within the database, and then you can select the tables underneath it. It really depends on how your data is structured and your tables are organized. So in this case, I don't have a schema. It goes directly and shows me the tables in this database. And let's say, suppose I select a particular table. Let's say this is the table I need to get data from. And this could be a view. So if it's a view, it will show up in this list. And now we will click on Get Columns. So it will show me all the tables. In some cases, you may have encrypted values, so you may want to decrypt it. So we support PGP encryption as well. So here you will select all, click on that Select All link, and then you will see there's a list of all the fields that are part of this view or table that you have selected. And then you click OK. Here in this box, whatever you have selected in that previous thing will show up as part of this query. Now you can also write your own query here, depending upon what your preferences are, depending upon if you want to do your own inner joins or own complex SQL query, you can do that too. That's why we have this as a text area where you can type in your own query if you want to. And then the primary key is important in cases where you want to do an update. So for example, let me just go back and see if there is a account number field, which is which could be used as a primary key. And the reason why I'm going to do this is because this can be used as our update scenario, because you want to update a status field. Once the data is processed, you want to change the status to, let's say, processed. So the primary key is important so that you can update the table. So this is going to be very useful when we actually create the mapping. And then we'll click on Save. So here I have a database already exists in the database. So there's a database entity which I have already created, which is this one right here. So you create that particular schema, and let me just edit that and just put in the account number so that I can then use this in our mapping. So I have this activity already created, so that's why it was giving me that message that the activity name already exists. So I created the schema. I created the IDoc for the for using that in the mapping. Let me take a step back and show you where the IDoc is. So here under schema, I use the database to create the database source schema. And then I can go into the advanced positional. This is where I was using the inventory receipt, where I created this particular activity. Now when I open this up, you will notice that all the record types that are part of this IDoc, including the Z segment, which is the custom segment right here, shows up as part of this schema definition. So this is where I selected the XSD and uploaded it and clicked on Save, and then XSD obviously has all this information where now you can actually see what all those fields are. So just as a summary, what I have done so far is I went to Services, I went to Schema, I chose Advanced Positional to upload the XSD, then I chose Database to create the database schema, right? Now, one thing that you should also remember is that the schema that we create can be used both as source or as target. So in case where you're getting an inbound IDoc, you can use the same schema, because schema is decoupled from either source or target. It can be used in both directions. So this is where I created the IDoc inventory receipt. And now, the next thing that we will do is we'll create the source and target. So far we have created a connector that connects to the database and the schema that defines the table structure as well as the IDoc structure. Now what I will do is I will create the source to actually tell the application where to go and get the source data, and also the target in terms of where to drop in those IDoc files once they're created. Now, the reason why I'm creating the source database, even though I have created the schema as well as the connector above that, is because your database connection could be different from the database that you have chosen to create the schema with. So your production pointer could be different than your test database pointer. So that's why we have decoupled the source from the actual connection as well as the schema. So here your source could be, this is your accounts or your inventory accounts database, and this is your source DB. And you select your sales database connection that you created earlier and the schema that contains this table definition, and then you click on Save. Right? So this is your source, and what we will do is we will create the same thing as part of our target. So the target would be file target, let's say, and we, in fact, under the file target, in our discussion this morning, we actually created this file target where I'm going to drop in my IDoc files in this particular directory with this timestamp and date stamp, and the extension is txt. So this could be, dynamically named as well. In fact, the file name could be dynamic as well, where we can use a parameter to update this information here. So again, something to think about. So here we will save it. So this is already created. We created the source, and now let's create our process flow. So this is the final thing. So the process flow is where we create a new flow. So suppose we will create a new process, and let's give it a name as IDoc creation process. This will generate IDoc file, and then we'll click on the process flow designer. All right. So this is the process flow that I'm going to use, and in one of the steps where we will be using those schemas will be the mapping step, and that's something that we will create as part of this process flow design. So in this process flow, what we will do is we will open up the process designer, as it will open up on your screen, and the next thing that we will do is we will put in all those activities that we have created so far. So here we'll go to the activities, we'll go to source, we have our database source created, which is this one right here, and we will simply select that here. The next thing that we will do is we will go in and put in our target, which is our file target, and the file target is the IDoc inventory target, right? So this is where we want to drop this in. Now the thing is, what is the mapping that we need to do, which is the middle part of this flow. So let's create the mapping. So here to create the mapping, what we'll do is we'll go to services. So everything is under services. We'll go to data transformation, and let's create the mapping. So you can either create all these activities earlier and then drop them in the process flow, or you can start creating the flow and then also create the activities as you go along. So it really depends on how you want to create these flows. What your preferences are. So here, let's suppose we want to create an IDoc inventory receipt, and let's call it new map, and this will be a new map for IDoc, and click on Data Mapper. Right? So this data mapper will open up on your screen just like the process designer, and this is where we actually do the mapping between the source schema, which is the database, and the target schema, which is the IDoc. So the mapping will open up. So this is your mapping interface. It has a source panel on the left and the target on the right, and then we will click on this icon here on the top left corner. This will allow you to see all the schemas that you have created for different types of data. Right? So here, the first one is our advanced positional. This is where the IDoc that we created shows up here, and this is the target that we will create. So this is why we will send it to the target, and our database is our inventory database from where we are getting the data. So this will be our source, and we will simply load them into the mapper. Right, so the IDoc shows up here on the right, and all the segments that you see here as we scroll down will show up here, depending on how many there are. So this is just for this IDoc. Any IDoc will pretty much look like this. And then on the source side, we have the data fields for the source table. And then based on your mapping rules, you will simply start mapping them. So again, this data that you see here, fields that you see here are, I'm just using it as an example. So you will have your own data tables or view from which you are selecting the fields, and you can simply map them as part of this, map. So here I'm just mapping this just as a sake of showing you how this mapping works. And we will simply then create a field. So this would be something that we can very easily create. And again, I can give you a much more detailed example of what a mapping looks like. The record-to-record map that you see here basically means for each record, and then you can simply map all these fields that you want to map. Right? So let's suppose I created this map. This is fine. And then you can go into the debugger, and here you can create a mock data by clicking on this button, or you can upload your existing data. And when you click on this button here, it will show you the fields that have been mapped so far and how they look like. And this is created as the target. So again, this is a simple example. And the data mapper actually contains a lot of other functions as well, like math functions, string functions like concatenation, substring, trimming of spaces, etc. Date functions, aggregation functions, conditional functions. We also support lookup into a table. Access functions, these are more advanced type of functions where you want to do a scanning of the data, like following record or preceding record. Like following sibling or preceding sibling, as you see here. So there are a lot of these advanced type of logic that you can put in. And one of the other things that we also support is we allow you to actually use your own value map. So for example, if you're getting a field like XYZ and you want to map it to a field value as ABC, right? So you may have a code conversion list or type list that you may want to use to convert whatever is coming in to a normalized value that you want on the up-on side. And you can do that through this value map thing. So you can use it as part of the mapping. And if you have a file, you can also import it. So there are a lot of these features in the mapping that are very useful. So again, this is your mapping. So you save the mapping here. So once the mapping is saved, what we will do is we will drop this into our canvas area. So you will do a synchronize. So synchronization is important so that it will recognize there's a new activity, and then simply select that particular map, and this is the one that we just created, and you can also put that in. The other way to actually select an activity rather than looking at this long list, since I've logged in as admin, so that's why I'm seeing all the other person's activities as well. Typically, you will have your own developer account, which will allow you to see only yours or anyone else who has shared it with you. In any case, what you will do is you can also attach it through this, this particular IDoc structure. And what that does is it allows you to see which activities that match your, anything that you type in here. It will automatically show you everything. So this is, again, another way to select your activity. Now, the final thing that we need to do is we need to tell the file target that before you place the file, we need to actually convert it into its actual format. So the mapping will create that intermediate XML format because that's what mapping does. But now what we'll do is we'll tell the application that once you have created the actual output, put it into its native format, which is whatever the IDoc that we have created. So this is where you will create that, and here you will need to change the transformer type to a XML stream to stream. Basically, will allow you to create that output based on whatever the mapping generates as part of its intermediate XML. So here we will connect all these pieces together as we are seeing you, showing you here, and as you create your flow, the alerts message will tell you whether you've created a good flow or anything wrong with the design, it will show you all those alert messages here at the bottom. So again, a good way to validate whether your design is correct or not. And then you will simply save it. Now, one of the things that we also discussed was, what if we want to update the status of those records that we are getting from the source? The way you will do that is in the mapping. You can not only have the IDoc structure, but also you can perform an action or some sort of a activity that allows you to update the status field. So here what you can do is you can actually upload the same target on the database schema on the target side as well. So here you can define a target as your database schema, just like we have for the source. The same one can appear here. So you have your IDoc here, which is here, so I'm minimizing it. And now for the root, I can actually do the same map. And what it will do is it will map the same fields, but now we can change the status field to process. So here, let me connect all the matching children, as we can see here. So your matching children will be done. And then on the status side, we can change so let me remove this one-to-one map. And here we can change the text rules to process. And then apply the rule. So now the idea is that whatever data we are getting that we are mapping into the IDoc, we are also updating and changing the status to process for those records, right? So again, right away you can also create the target. And one of the things that you can also do is you can add another target here and then map the second output into that target field. So again, it's very straightforward. So what we'll do next is we'll run it. In order to run the process, what we will do is we'll go to Monitor, and we will go to Dashboard, and we will go to Process Flow, because it's a process that we have created and we want to run this. So here's your flow that has been created, and we can very easily execute the process, or whichever process flow you have created can be executed as part of this exercise. So here, this is the process flow I created, IDoc creation process, and I'm going to execute the process flow. And once the process flow executes, it will take the data and it will say it's running, and then you can change the status by clicking on this refresh icon to see whether it has been executed or not, and now it says it's executed, right? So you can execute multiple of these, depending upon what your preferences are. The other way to execute this process flow is you can actually go to Develop, and in the events, you can schedule it. So here you can go to Calendar, and you can actually create a calendar event or schedule batch scheduler. And in this case, you can schedule, say, I want to run this every, noon, every day of the month, and every month. So you can actually create a cron expression. There's a help here. So what cron expression will do is it will give you granularity in terms of how you want to schedule this process to run and what time, what date, etc. So it's very, flexible in terms of what schedule type you want and when you want to run this. So you can use this as a reference to set this up. So you can run this flow anytime you want based on whatever your schedule is. So here, let's go to our flow. So here we have actually created the couple of files under the folder. So here, let me just go into one of the folders and go to SAP. This is where my files are created. So you'll notice that some of these files have been created with whatever the naming convention we chose.